I thought this was like America's Got Talent. When does the show start? Judges? That would be much more fun than what we're doing right now. Well, I'm Johnny Akzam. I have lived in Minnesota since 1999. I, grew up in California and Missouri, kind of a weird mixture, and that wasn't my choice. Let's remember, we don't choose where we're born or where we're raised, but when I was old enough to know better, I made my home here in Minnesota. And it really stuck with me as far as policy and politics-wise when I was going to RCTC, and I was in the Student Senate, and I met a man named Paul Wellstone just prior to his unfortunate death. But after meeting him and then the disaster, and then we had the internet, you could read about him and his legacy, and I was like, this is exactly the kind of politics that we should have always been having. I've always had that bigger head, the strange kid in class that thought about society and how we could all be nice to each other. I just thought that there was a saying, and everybody sees it on all of my website and social media, never separate the life you live from the words you speak. And when I heard that, with other quotes and things that I get in my head, I examined it and said, that's the kind of life I want to live. If I say something, and sometimes I'll talk about something too much to hold myself accountable, because if I keep saying it, then I know somebody hears it, and then I have to be accountable to what I'm saying because I want to live my life that way. And I decided that if ever I got involved in politics, that was the kind of politician I wanted to be. And here we are, 2016, rocked the boat. And we understand that it's a dangerous climate when we throw our votes away for the decisions to be made up by other people, because we don't really know what their motives are all the time. And we got to be careful about that. So we wrap up our conversation and we move on to Vicki.
And on to me. I'm Vicki Jensen. I live in Owatonna. My husband and I have an insurance agency. And the reason that we have that in Owatonna is we were on the family farm over by Wyndham and trying to get enough land to make a go of it, and decided to start the agency to supplement our income. And as that grew, we were offered an agency in Owatonna and we decided to take it. So we made a tough decision that many, many families are facing all the time on whether or not they're going to be able to stay on their farm and pass that land and that operation and their legacy really on to their kids. So I joined Farmers Union. I've been Secretary Treasurer in Steele County for almost 20 years, fighting for those things to keep families on farms. So a big reason I want to go up to Congress is if I want to make the changes to help make that happen. A lot of it happens out in Washington, and so that's where I would like to go so that I can do that work. I tried to think back the first time that I was actively involved in something that was politically active, where I actually took action, and what I came down to is in 10th grade, my girlfriends and I decided we needed a girls softball team because we didn't have one. It was Title X, we needed it. So we went to everyone and they all said no. So in protest, some of us tried out for the boys baseball team. I made the team. Yes, so I'm getting ready, I'm going to play center field, I get on the bus, the coach comes over. I'm sorry, Vicki, but the town did a petition. They brought it to the school board, and the school board has ruled that the girls cannot play baseball because there are no girls' locker rooms out on the baseball diamonds. Usually not boys either. I mean, you dress at home and you get on the bus. But I learned some very valuable things from that experience. I had a decision to make. What should I do? Do I continue or do I just drop it? I decided to stay on as manager of that team, work with the public and the school board, which I didn't know at the time. That's what we needed to do. But if you want to have change happen, actively happen, you need to be involved first. You need to take some action. And you can't give up. And that's what I did, and we got our tea.
Well, my name is Joe Sullivan. I am a first-time candidate for office here in the 1st District. I'm an attorney. I work in clean energy. I started my career working with municipal governments, working to make sure that our communities in the 1st District and throughout greater Minnesota have resources for police and for fire and libraries, books in their libraries, fighting for infrastructure, wastewater and water infrastructure so that our communities can grow. And I did a lot of work with municipal electric utilities, and that led me to work in clean energy, and I'm very proud of the work that I've done supporting almost 6,000 people in our district that work in wind and solar and energy efficiency. And I'm honored to have been a part of trying to make our electric system cleaner, our gas system cleaner. And that's my work. I live in Mankato. My wife is a physician, a pediatrician. I have 2 daughters in school in Mankato, Rose and Vera. It was my daughter Rose's 10th birthday yesterday, so it was a burden dinner. We had a little moment there where I talked about it because I was away from her. But the reason that I'm running is because of what's happening in Washington. And as I said, I'm a first-time candidate, and I look at the parade of horribles that comes out of Washington, D.C., and every day, there's some kind of new outrage, and despite all of the fog of what's happening there, there's something very insidious and purposeful at work. There is a plan to privatize the public good. There's a plan to root out the last 100 years of progressivism, and we need people to step in, and we need people to say, not on our watch. We are not going to let this happen. We're not going to let our civil discourse devolve into the nonsense that it is, and we're not going to let everything that we hold dear and true. We don't want to go back to the Gilded Age. That's not where we need to go, and that's why I'm running, and that's what I want to do in Congress.
You ready? Thank you all for coming. You all doing okay? Yeah, enjoying the day. My name's Rich Wright, and I'm born and raised in the district. I was raised in Rochester, but my siblings and I literally spent our childhood crammed in the back of a Buick, traveling throughout the entire district, because my grandparents lived in Jackson. My mom grew up by Slayton Curry. I have family in Mankato. My dad grew up by Spring Grove, Mabel, down in the southeast corner. So this is my home. I care about this place because I grew up here. After graduating from high school, I went to college, and then I went to law school. After law school, I did 10 years in the Army Reserve as a military lawyer, served 5 years as a prosecutor in the Rochester area. And my wife and I, that's where we live now, just south of the city of Rochester, and that's where we raise our children. My twins are seniors in the high school there, and my Singleton, my 9th grader, is in the 9th grade there. And we chose to live here, and we're part of our community in southern Minnesota, and we have our values. And that's important. This race is the most important election we've ever run into. We hear that sub-recycle, but the truth is, given what's going on in Washington, D.C. today, it is truer today than it ever has been. And we need to hold this seat, and I know I'm the candidate that can do that. Not only did I grow up here and have the background that I outlined, the campaign that we're running on and the values that I have, I think, play well for this district. I believe that we need to move to a Medicare for All system, comprehensive cradle-to-grave coverage today. We need to do a $15 an hour minimum wage today. We need to make sure that if you're not only make the investments in early childhood education, but when you graduate from high school, you should be able to go into the trades, and we partner with our union so you can go into the trades without paying for any licensing fees, or you go on to college without paying for tuition. And we need to work on keeping our streets safe, and we'll get to that hopefully later. I look forward to chatting with you on the issues ahead of us. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you for those introductory remarks. We, as Jen said, provided 2 questions to each of our candidates ahead of time, and those are listed in your program as well. We're going to go ahead and start with the first question. The first question is, given the deep partisan divide in Washington, D.C. and across our country, what will you do to bridge this gap and find common ground on the many tough issues facing Congress? And if we can start this time at this end of the table, and we'll go down the other direction. So, Mr. Wright.
Yeah, so in my profession, I deal with conflict on a daily basis. Usually when people come to me, I'm a trial lawyer. It's bad, right? It's in a trial. It's as bad as it can get. It's as contentious as it can get. It doesn't get any more emotional or divisive. And oftentimes, in fact, in every case I've worked on, I work with someone across the aisle who has a diametrically opposed position, because that's what happens when you're involved in a lawsuit. And yet 99% of my cases settle. And the way that happens is it takes a lot of hard work, and I'm good at it. And it means reaching out across the aisle to the other side and asking right out of the gate, where are your immovables? And then I tell them, this is where I can't move. And then usually what happens is then you work on the areas that you can work on, because they're not immovable. And as you do that, you build rapport with someone who's on the opposite side of the aisle. And once you build rapport and you solve those other problems, those initial immovables, they're no longer immovable. And that's because you built the rapport and the relationship you need. And then you can solve the case. And that's the way it should work. You don't take things personally, you let things bounce off, you always treat people with respect. And when you do that, you can solve any problem that there is. And I'm good at that because that's what I do for a living. Not only that, I know that I have to rely and keep a good relationship with that person across the aisle from me, because in the future, I'm going to need their help on another case or on another issue. And if you make personal barbs or personal attacks against someone in that type of situation, you sabotage that relationship. And you not only hurt yourself, but you hurt your client and the people you want to serve. And I understand that because it's, what I do for a living. So I make sure I always am respectful. I'm proud to say that with every lawyer I've worked with, I can always go out and have a drink with them after a case. Thank you.
So, I think this is, the way I approach this question is the way I approach my life. Is I don't look at the jersey that the other side is wearing and say, well, I'm not going to talk to you. And because you're wearing a red jersey or, you're wearing a blue jersey. Well, I guess I wear blue jerseys. So, but I think we talk to everybody. We need to treat everybody respectfully, approach the dialogue as, they come from a position of goodwill, and that they have their own way of viewing this, and we need to be respectful of that. So that's the way I approach my personal relationships. That's the way I approach my professional relationships. And in my job that I work at for the organization that I work for, and when I was working in a law firm, we do a lot of work at the Minnesota Capitol. And the projects that I'm most proud of are those projects that were bipartisan, that we were working together. Legislation that we worked on for the wind industry, which was bipartisan. We had Republican lead authors, and it was legislation to advance and build more wind energy and solar throughout southern Minnesota and throughout our state, and required some regulatory reform. And you find that area of common ground. You find that zone where people are going to be, this is where they want to work towards. And then you move the ball forward. So the way I look at things is I'm going to talk to anybody. I think that's the great strength of someone like Tim Walz, for instance, is that Tim, why do Republicans vote for Tim? Why do independents vote for Tim? It's because Tim leans into every relationship. He talks to everybody. There's not a voter that Tim has not talked to and that he doesn't like. He likes every voter. And that's the way I am too. And that's what I will do in Congress, and that's the way I comport myself personally, and that's the way I'll act professionally and as a member of Congress.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen?
Well, when I moved to Owatonna, like I was talking about, I ended up I served on the school board and got a good understanding of how I could be effective and how I understood how policy revolves around a lot of different people that have a lot of different ideas, how things should work, and how could I bring and move things forward. And I was able to do that and decided to run for the Minnesota Senate. And I won in a district that hadn't had a Democrat in over 40 years. And when I got there, I did things like this. I joined the Purple Caucus. What the Purple Caucus was, it was members from the Republican and the Democratic Party who were trying to figure out how can we change not just laws, but process and procedures that we do in government that allow more transparency and allow people to be involved and come into the situation. Having served as a representative of people, I had to learn very quickly where I was going to stand on these issues. Because it's not just that we're partisan on the issues. We treat people that don't agree with us right now as we don't even like them. This is personal. So when I ran in 2012, we had something on the ballot for marriage equality. And I went around and had all kinds of good conversations with many people. And what we did is we talked to our family, we talked to our friends, and then we talked to people outside that might not agree with us. And if we want to change partisan divide, and if we want to do those kinds of things, we have to have those conversations. And it's not just me that wants to be a representative that's going to be able to do that. That has to happen on the ground, and it has to happen in your community, and it has to happen in your home. And it's hard work. And when we had those conversations, it wasn't easy. And we ended up in conversations that we didn't want to have. But we were able to do that. And even though this district decided that we shouldn't vote for marriage equality, I took that vote on the floor because I was talking to people and letting them know how I felt about the issue. And then I moved and had second Saturday with your senator event, the second Saturday of every single month in 3 different locations, because I wanted this to be a communication. That's what this event is about. That's what I'm about. That's what I would do out in Congress.
Well, I like to take a different approach. I think that we're moving to a time when we're actually dismantling the aisle. I'm part of a coalition of candidates across the United States that range from Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Greens, not a Libertarian yet, but maybe we'll get one. And they're all candidates that are doing well in their races, that are planning to win, they all support things like the federal jobs guarantee, which I'll talk about later. And we're already working with each other on the items that are going to address people's problems, right? That's what it's about. There should be no bending when it comes to human rights. If you don't want to bake a cake for somebody because of their sexual orientation, then you don't get to serve the public. That's all there is to it. There's no bending on that. You don't have to bend on that. You treat people with the same dignity, no matter who they are, where they come from, or what beliefs they have. And if you can't do that, then you're not a part of society. Go bake cakes in your church. And I think we have to start taking a stricter stand on people who treat other human beings disrespectfully. That's called bullying. And I used to get bullied, and I don't take it anymore. And that can be up in Washington, too. If there's people that don't want to come over to doing what's right, see, it's not about me being right. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to do right. And what that means in Congress is representing the best values of the people back here, not just some of the values or a few of the values, but we all have our bad days. Those are not the values I want to take up there, right? I want to take the days when you're the happiest and when you're the most joyful to reach out and help people and say, that's the person I want to, I'm going to take that up there and show everybody that's what we have back here. Because that's what affects the entire country. This isn't about Minnesota, this race. This is about the entire country. Our federal government has a responsibility to make sure that we have the resources that we need and that no rights are being violated.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to our second question. I appreciate all your answers as we're beginning. And Mr. Akzam, we're going to keep mixing it up on either end. So we'll have you start with this question, and this is our second in our program. What are your top 1 to 2 priorities you believe need to be tackled at the federal congressional level that will have the greatest impact on your constituents here in Minnesota? And as time is available, what would you do to help address those priorities?
I've been waiting for this question. I've been doing this for the last 3 months. Instead of beating on the doors of the DFL, I've been studying the federal economic system and the federal jobs guarantee. And this is our 90% answer to socioeconomic issues in our society. Unfortunately, none of the other candidates know too much about it, I don't think, because it's a program that hasn't gained much traction among establishment Democrats and the mainstream. So you don't hear about it. So what the federal jobs guarantee is, because I had to do this yesterday for 1 minute over at the Stonewall, is it's federally funded, locally administered. And any problem that you have in your society, a panel like this comes together and says, let's create a community center to deal with youths not having anything to do after school. Well, we have the Boys and Girls Club. Yeah, but it's underfunded. And it's a private organization. It's too far deep. Let's do a community thing. We run it. The paychecks come straight from the government to the person, not to this panel, and they dole it out. I go into many, many details about it. But that's number 1, because that starts lifting people up immediately. And we don't have to worry about affordable housing if people can afford housing. And then the next thing that couples along with that, of course, is Medicare for All. And we already have H.R. 676, John Conyers' bill, Despite his shortcoming, he was still a decent legislator, and we're not sure who's going to pick that bill up. But if there's any provisions in it that we need to fix or that we can go further on, we can. But if you give people jobs and medical, the freedom to go and get medical assistance when they need it, then you've pretty much taken away 90% of the burden in each person's individual life. And then that carries over into what we can do in our communities. Anything you can think of. I know I get excited, don't I? Anything you can think of, this program can cover on a local level. It's not going to pay for the land or for the building materials, but once you have the land and the building materials, it will pay for the people to build the building. That's good.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jensen?
Number one, I think we have to pass the reform that makes all other reforms possible, and that's campaign finance reform, and trying to get some of the big money out of how we set public policy. I see a big use of leverage and power that wasn't met when the framers and our forefathers, established this country. It was supposed to be based on of the people, by the people, and for the people. And if we want to get back to that, which was meant to be a self-governing, we need to remove some of the money out of the process. That's number one. Second, I'm very interested in how we track our gross domestic product and how we say how successful we are as a country based on what that looks like. Unfortunately, it includes things like sale of AR-15s and high-capacity magazines. It includes incarcerating people with mental illness in our prisons, and it includes all kinds of things as good, which I don't think we should be counting as good. When we set public policy, we need to start tracking, because our gross domestic product doesn't measure how we distribute that wealth. So income inequality is not measured. It's not determined who is in poverty, who is hungry, all of those things we should start tracking. It doesn't keep track of the cost of cleaning up our air and land and water from pollution. It doesn't include the quality of our education. It doesn't include our loss of families on farms. There are all kinds of things that I believe if we start tracking and measuring and using, I think Massachusetts is a state that is using it as a separate index and using it as a legislature and as a government body to make public policy based on those numbers as well. GDP is very important. We need to understand where we are. But it's outdated, it's antiquated. I was an efficiency analyst at Citibank and I followed the money there, and I'll do it out in Washington too.
So there are so many things, but if I'm limited to two, the two are a public works infrastructure bill, and in my work with cities, I used to talk to administrators and mayors, and we did a lot of work around infrastructure. And what city administrators will tell me, and in particular, a good friend of mine said, Joe, the first question we always get when we're trying to attract a manufacturer or a business to town is what is the capability, the capacity of your wastewater treatment facility? And if the answer is we've got to go to the state for $40 million in funding to increase capacity, next town. So every community, there is $11 billion of wastewater and water need in greater Minnesota. Several billion of those dollars is in the first district. We absolutely, only the federal government has the resources to address that, and that is just water and wastewater. That does not include broadband infrastructure, that does not include roads and bridges, transportation, transit infrastructure, really critical stuff. There are billions and billions of dollars of need that a public works infrastructure bill has to fund. And those communities that have an old wastewater treatment facility, that is like a cap on their ability to grow. They simply cannot process their waste, and that's why they move on to another community. The other critical issue is healthcare. I've talked to far too many farmers, far too many folks who are paying $30,000 a year in premiums, $5,000, $6,000 a year in their deductible, and they're functionally uninsured. And that hangs like the sword over their head, this uncertainty that they live with, and we absolutely need to address healthcare. And what I want people to do is I want people to be able to opt into the Medicare system, not just reduce the age to 55, but I want people to be able to opt into the Medicare system however old they are. I also think that if you have a good plan through your union, if you have a good plan through your job, you should be able to keep that. But everybody should have the opportunity to have health insurance through the Medicare plan.
there are a lot of issues hitting us. For example, climate change, that's kind of a big deal. Same with the money in politics. Those are really big deals, but after practicing law, when I was in law school, I volunteered at an legal assistance firm where we helped people get health insurance. Because back then, people were getting kicked off health insurance for pre-existing conditions. When I was serving clients in Rochester, I do legal assistance now, the number one issue hitting people is health care. So while the climate change and the money in politics are big deals, the number one issue facing people in our district right now today is this health care issue. People are literally having to choose between food or medication. I have a friend who's a surgeon, had a patient come in, had to have necessary surgery, couldn't afford the preoperative medications, so they can't do the surgery. How crazy is the system? And it's hurting us. People can't afford it. Farmers are paying $35,000 a year between deductibles and premiums. How is this sustainable? It's not. Expanding the ACA, which is the current system, is not a viable option. Why would we expand something that's not working? And that's why we need to move quickly and hard and fast to a comprehensive Medicare for all system, and I would make that my number one priority. And that's cradle-to-grave coverage, including sight, hearing, dental, mental health parity, and reasonable reimbursement rates so that our rural clinics can stay open. That is the number one issue facing our district, and because of that, I will make that the number one issue in Congress in getting that passed.
Thank you. So that concludes our pre-planned questions, and we've gotten a number of questions from the audience. So we'll just start with one of them, and who are we starting with?
I think Mr. Wright.
Mr. Wright. Okay, so the first audience question is, what are your thoughts on gun control? Should this effort be led by the state laws or federal laws? I know Ms. Jensen alluded to this a little bit already in her opening, but yeah, we'll start with you.
Still 2 minutes?
Yes.
So, like every kid that grew up here, I took the gun safety class. When I was a kid, we all did that. I fired as a kid. In the military, I'm a sharpshooter on the M16. I'm a sharpshooter on the 9mm. I understand how weapons work. I understand how M16s work. And it's a great weapon of war. But right now, the assault rifles, the ARs, they are making war zones out of our streets and our school zones. And it needs to stop. We need to start protecting our kids and putting the value of our children's lives ahead of guns. I'm the only candidate that's been asking that we go back to the assault rifle ban. When we did it between 1994 and 2004, when we implemented it, we had an 80% decrease in deaths during mass shootings. When we let the ban lapse, we had a 180% increase in deaths during mass shootings. 180%. I would say that's pretty good evidence that it worked. And to me, it makes sense. Why would we not do this? It's a common sense solution. In addition to the other common sense solutions that we're going to talk about. Why are we not closing up the loopholes on background checks? Anytime a weapon's exchanged, we should be able to go online and check. Red light, green light, is it a good exchange or not? That's an easy solution. Why are we, and we have to, this is a public health crisis, and we need to view it as a public health crisis. And to do that, we need to unshackle the NIH and the CDC so that they can actually do the research and figure out what makes good policy. The Rand Corporation looked at this recently within the last 2 months, and their conclusion, we have no research. How ridiculous is that? We have no research on something that's killing us. This is a public health crisis, so let's get the research done so we can make good policy.
Thank you.
This is a short-term to long-term problem. First thing, we need to tighten up the background check system. We've been tracking the person-to-person transfer of automobiles for more than 100 years. It's the title and registration system. It's pretty straightforward. We can do that with guns as well. We need to make sure that things that turn a gun, we can't own a fully automatic weapon in this country. We shouldn't be able to turn a gun into a fully automatic weapon. So things like bump stocks and trigger pulls, the large capacity magazines. We need to unshackle, as Richard said, we need to unshackle the NIH and the CDC so that they can study. We have 20 years worth of data that has been lost because our public health agencies cannot study what, gun safety. And, there are things that I can do with a cell phone, or things that I can do with the cell phone, like I cannot open my wife's phone without her fingerprints. We can do that with guns. We can make guns safer and smarter. And then we need to keep guns that are uniquely dangerous, combat weapons, out of the hands of folks. I mean, off of the streets. This is, but we need to lead with the research. And that is where what I view that there are certain guns that are uniquely dangerous. And I don't want to be arguing about what the molding of a stock looks like. I want to be focused on what it is about this particular gun that makes it dangerous. 98% of gun deaths are caused by handguns, 2% are by assault weapons, and we need to address the entire problem. And that's why it's so important to follow and lead with the research. Other things too, things like, 20, it should be raising the age that you can buy an assault weapon or a gun to 21. I think that's absolutely, that's low-hanging fruit that we can work on. Digitizing gun registration so that the ATF has that in digital form rather than in paper form, which is what they've got right now. So that whenever there's a gun crime that occurs, that it can be studied quickly, that the ATF can go and address it quickly. So.
Thank you.
Well, again, number one, let's get the money out of this. Let's get the money out of it so that legislators can make good, sound, common sense decisions, not based on whether or not they're going to receive some kind of campaign donation first. I'm under the strong belief that some people shouldn't have guns. They shouldn't have access to guns. I worked a lot in the state legislature on domestic violence and the reduction of gun violence. That's what this is about to me. We know in a mass shooting that a lot of times it's to try to commit suicide. They go in knowing either they're going to shoot themselves or they're going to get shot by somebody else who has a gun that comes in there to try to stop it. So I would like to see more money put into crisis intervention. And it's not that they've been diagnosed with a mental illness, it's because something has happened in their life that has put them into a crisis. And we know how to deal with some of those. We just don't have enough people that have been trained and enough resources to deal with it when it happens. Then suicide prevention. We know how to help this and solve this, but again, not enough training and not enough resources put into that portion of the problem. But some people should not have guns. So what I did is I carried a piece of legislation in the Senate that said if you were convicted of 5th-degree strangulation or a 5th-degree domestic violence offense, you could not own a handgun. So, and that passed. And I carried it in a district that, yes, it's a hard conversation to talk about gun ownership. But I felt that strongly about it, and that's why I'm in favor of temporary restraining orders. If your family, like we decided that my grandfather was getting old and just not safe with a gun, we decided as a family to take it away. We need families to have a tool and a resource that they can use if they know that this is a situation that they're dealing with and facing, that they can go to a judge and try to stop, do something. We always want them to do something, do something. Well, just telling people, we're knowing that that's not actually working. So let's give them another tool that they can use.
Thank you.
Right, so all that plus, because all that is really, right on target. And one thing I'm proud of Minnesota is we already have stricter gun laws in this state than a lot. And we do have responsible gun owners. Nobody wants to take people's guns away. I was talking to social media about it. Responsibility, your rights and your responsibilities. The Second Amendment was brought about for the Minutemen. The people, not everybody was carrying a gun back then, but they were afforded the option to act as a militia in the respect to secure the state for the people. And that's kind of gotten warped over the centuries, and when we look at private ownership, most people, like around here in our rural areas, they hunt. There's a difference between a hunting rifle, a shotgun with a slug in it, and an AR-15. Anybody who says an AR-15 is a hunting rifle you get it. They're just making a red herring argument, a straw man argument to try to justify something that's ridiculous. The technology thing is big. We made the auto industry start putting in seatbelts, then airbags. Now they're going to be automatic brake systems. It's the next one. We're not too far on the whole self-driving thing yet, but you see where we enact regulations for the industry, but the NRA and the money, that is a part of it. But stop voting for people who always have the money, and you'll stop getting people who are influenced by money. Wait a minute. What? Yeah. Stop voting. Stop asking candidates how much have you raised, because that's not an indication of how well they can do up in Congress. Okay? All that is an indication of who's trying to influence them. Think about it. So if we want to get money out of the gun debate, then stop voting for people who are getting money from the gun legislators or from the gun lobbyists and all the other stuff they said.
Well, guess what? That was a perfect lead into our next question, so you'll just get to continue along with what you were just talking about.
Okay?
Because you have next.
Which is the question.
Yes. And the question is, submitted by the audience, Money in Campaigns is the title. What do you do about dark money, PACs, lobbyists, and Citizens United? Are we doomed?
No, as a matter of fact, I have my, there's an app for your Constitution, you put it on your phone. You don't have to carry the little book around. But Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, I've been studying up on this because there's a way for Congress to strip that jurisdiction away from the Supreme Court, their ruling of Citizens United, because we know it's going to take about 10 years, if not longer, to get them to turn it over, unless we really take over everything in 2020 and it's just, we have all this power, which we can't really rely on that. But immediately, we can enact over their jurisdiction. Okay, still studying on that. Now, again, how do you get money out of politics? You stop supporting it. If you don't like a company, you boycott it, you stop buying their products. Well, if you don't like people that take big money, then don't support them. We know one of the candidates in this race who isn't here today got 90% of his money from another place that isn't here. That's my main target for the primary, is that's got to go, because that's exactly what we're talking about right here. Our campaign is, I wish the grassroots would grow a little bit, but it's okay. I am more concerned about people. I don't want to have to tie a pork chop around my neck for the dog to play with me. So if I got to pay you to carry a message that we should all be carrying anyway, then how dedicated are you to the message? So we're attracting volunteers. We have non-paid staff, people who are concerned about our future, want to put time into it in their spare time. And we are showing people, I have a friend in Texas, Seema Hernandez, who ran for Senate against Beto O'Rourke in the primary and didn't have enough time. She ran on $4,000, got 246,000 votes in the state of Texas on $4,000. Tell me you need money. You don't. You need a message and you need people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, of the people, by the people, for the people, really is a strong statement that I think we are moving so far away from. When we say, you are viable as a candidate first if you can self-fund your campaign, no matter where that came from, no matter who you are, if you have your own money to put in, whoop, you're good. If you have rich friends, wealthy friends that you know, that can give you maximum amounts of donations through other things, that's a good thing too. Woo-hoo, you're in. Now, if you don't have those things, and you rely on grassroots, people making donations who don't have a lot of money that you want to represent, and that you will go to Washington or to the state or wherever it is, that these people are willing to give up some of the funding and their money that they just really can't afford to give you, but they do because they support you and they feel strongly that you're going to do because they believe in you and they trust you. If you're running for Congress, Washington says that's not enough. It's not enough. I say it is, so let's do some things. America's Promise is a grassroots organization that's trying to get an amendment to the Constitution of the United States that adjusts the amendment so that it doesn't say, because what Citizens United said is, states no longer have any power to set their own rules, to set their own laws that says what you want as a state and as citizenry, what you want to put into, because money is speech. Money isn't speech, it's power, and it's leverage. And I talk to so many people, and I just know that people are not as involved, and they're not getting active because they just feel like they're drowning in piles and piles of money, that their voice isn't as strong. And that's reduction of free speech is what this has done. It's reduced people's speech unless you have money. So let's get it out of there.
Thank you.
So, I mean, this is an extremely complicated problem. It is both, we have both short-term issues that we can work on, long-term issues that we have to work on. And then I think it's also compounded by the fact that we have an electoral system, a map that is gerrymandered, and you have districts that are tightly titrated in so that it favors one party over the other. I think that as far as Citizens United is concerned, it's a U.S. Supreme Court case, so we need to have new justices in. This is one of the, we need to have, it is critical that we have justices who are going to go in and would overturn Citizens United. We have the opportunity for an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to overturn Citizens United, but these are long-term plays. This is something that's not going to happen in the next year or so. This is important, and we've got to be focused on that, but this is going to take a long time to do. On the things that we need to be doing what's going to happen is this is going to move to the states. This has to move to the states, and states are going to have to step up in the void. States are going to have to pass rules, and they're going to have to pass laws and statutes that direct and in terms of requiring disclosure, that put requirements on who can give and who can't give. It moves to the states. That a lot of this is where it's going to be, and we have to keep moving forward in the courts. We have to fund the courts. And as far as one of the things that I think we can do, and we absolutely need to be doing this, is and there's a bill in Congress right now that would take the Voting Rights Act and would take away from states the ability to do political gerrymanders. Now that is absolutely critical because it's like the fox guarding the hen house. That's where we're at right now. And I think that we need to move to a situation where you have nonpartisan commissions doing it.
Thank you.
I'm delighted this question got asked. And the reason is I see the Citizens United case and right now the potential for super PACs and the dark money coming into the campaigns as the greatest threat to our democracy today. It is hurting us. And we saw this last session where even the Republicans admitted that the only reason they were ramming through a tax bill is their rich donors are forcing them to. That's not how we want our country to be run. The problem is, to overturn Citizens United, you need to change the court, right? You need a different Supreme Court justice. Well, that's not going to happen anytime soon because of recent history. The most viable option at this point is a constitutional amendment. And there's already traction for that. And what we should do is create a constitutional amendment where we agree to publicly subsidize our campaigns and get all of the money out, period. Other countries do this, and there's support in our nation for this. The majority of us want this. And what you do is you say, hey, candidates, we're going to publicly subsidize the campaign. We're banning third-party contributions. We're banning PACs. We're banning corporations from contributing to the campaign. We cannot stop third-party expenditures on issues, but we can stop, in a constitutional amendment, third-party expenditures that attack a candidate or support a candidate. So we get rid of that money completely. And by doing that, what we do is we create a system where we can be sure that our representatives are actually representing us and not the big donors. Oh, and by the way, We limit the campaign time to you get 60 days before the primary and 60 days before the general election, because I think all of us are tired of the eternal campaigns that we're suffering through right now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we were going to give the candidates each a minute for a closing remark. We started a few minutes late, so what if, we're going to do this on the fly here, we're going to each give you 2 minutes for our closing remarks, but we had a few questions that we weren't able to get to, so I'm just going to give you those topics generally. Some of you have already alluded to those, and so if you want to expound on those, you can choose to. Otherwise, you can use your 2 minutes as you wish. Specifically, the other question was, given the state of our healthcare system, what specific solutions will you offer? So if you choose to, that's something. And then the other, again, some of us, we've already talked a little bit, just about narrow special interest groups, controlling members of Congress, and how can we address that? Are you willing to make a pledge, or what would you do specifically? So we will go ahead and just ask for your closing comments. If you want to discuss those, you can. Something else, we defer to you. Mr. Wright, we'll start with you.
Thanks. I think I addressed both those comments and answers that I've given. And if you want me to expand on them afterwards, grab me after this, and I'm more than willing to chat with you about that or any other issues. For example, we didn't even get to climate change, right? And that's the problem with these forums is we all know there's a lot of issues, and you know too that we just can't get to all of them. And that's why we end up, we get as many as we can. So grab me afterwards, and I'm willing to chat with you about any issues you have that were not addressed here. Thank you again for taking time to come out on a Sunday afternoon. And a little bit of snow flurries, it won't be too bad, right? I'm sure it'll be just fine. Again, my name is Rich Wright. I am asking for your support in this election. Born and raised here, I know this area well. And the platform that I talk about, Medicare for all, $15 an hour minimum wage, and making sure that not only investing in early childhood, every dollar we spend there, we save $8 down the road. That's an 800% return on investment. We can't afford not to do it. Ramping up our investment in K through 12, and making sure if you're going into the trades, you can do so without paying a dime. Get your licensing fees, get your skills training, and same with going on to public colleges and universities. Do that. We should be able to make that investment so you can do that without paying tuition. But they pay for themselves because you earn more money, you chip back into the community. When we did the GI Bill, we received, every dollar we invested there, we received $7 on a return on investment. That's a 700% return. These are smart, common day solutions. They are common sense solutions that are hitting our neighbors and our friends and our family today at the kitchen table. And that platform right now is winning in Deep Red District nationwide. So we know we can win here, because it's a platform that speaks to the problems we're having, makes life better for all of us. And when we all do better, we all do better. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you everybody for being here. It's great to see everybody. This is why I know we're going to do really well in November, as I see, we've got rooms of, passionate, engaged folks. One thing I want to talk about, in closing, I didn't get a chance to really talk about before, is I'm a passionate supporter of labor. I am, on the, in our party, the DFL, it's right in the name. And I think that is something that we as Democrats, we absolutely need to focus on labor and focus on making sure that our labor unions can rebuild, that our labor unions, it's easier to form unions. And the reason that I support labor is not because labor is an interest group, but it's because labor fights for safe work environments, they fight for good wages, they fight for pensions, they fight for equality, they fight for everything that we as Democrats hold true and believe. Our campaign is the only campaign that's been endorsed by 2 unions so far. We've been endorsed by the 49ers. We've also been endorsed by, just this past week, by the Iron Workers. I'm very honored to have their support. I tell a story about, on the campaign trail, about my grandpa. My grandpa was he was a union carpenter, and he always gave credit to Democrats for his union and the strength of his union, and that his union is why he had a good life, and that he could put my mom and my uncles through school, and that he could retire with dignity with Social Security and his pension. That was my grandpa, and a testament to that was when he died, there were 3 things in his coffin, and one of them was his union lapel pin. And I'm honored, I was honored to have earned their support, because of how important unions are. And we need to fight for unions, we need to fight for labor. In Congress, I will be a champion for labor. And, one thing I want to mention in closing is why is the DFL not as strong as it used to be? It's because labor's not as strong. In 1979, there were 29 million Americans in the AFL-CIO. Today, there's about 12 million Americans in the AFL-CIO. We need to get back, we need to fight for labor because they fight for everything that we hold true. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so I served in the Minnesota Senate, and I carried over 200 bills. So you can go out and take a look. I have a record. That's something that separates me from the other candidates in the race. And the things that I worked on were diverse and far-ranging, including domestic violence and public safety, infrastructure. I was able to get quarters of commerce and 3.2 miles of Highway 14, fought like crazy to get all of those things. There were, in education, passed what they considered one of the most innovative changes in school funding in decades, where we decreased the discrepancy between rural and urban schools. So take a look at that. But I also have in my brochure, take a look at that too, because I want to do very specific things, but I think we need to keep our promises as a country when it comes to DACA kids, when it comes to our Social Security and our Medicare, because, and not just for our seniors, to keep our promise to our seniors, people are paying into that right now, and if they don't get that back, most of them don't think that they're going to get it back. So we need to keep those promises and make those things strong. I will fight for that. How do we empower people? Because what we're doing is we're putting words on paper that you have to live by. And we can create public policy, like I talked about the income inequality and some of those things, what happens to you on your kitchen table. Healthcare is a big one. But I do not believe that we can change it all at one time. There's too many big interests that are going to fight it, and especially people that have a policy they want to keep. So I'm not for changing our healthcare system all in one swoop. Let's stabilize the individual market. And then let's lower the age of Medicare eligibility down to 55 so that people that are in that bracket and want to retire or want to do something different, they have that availability. And the reason that I'm choosing that, one number change on a bill. You don't have to start all over, go in a back room and do it in the dark the way that they do it now. Let's open up some of this transparency. It's not just about what bills are happening, it's how we're doing it. Is the process working for people? Do you feel like you have that ability to participate in the process that's out there? I'd be honored to be chosen as one of us working for all of us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Is that coming out of her about time?
I don't know, it didn't feel like 2 minutes to me. Went really fast.
Okay, so, here's the most important thing. We didn't really talk about the economy and taxes, but we need quantum solutions in a quantum, or we have to stop using binary solutions in a quantum world. That's the saying that I use. And that means that we don't have this zeros and ones mentality anymore. As a web developer, I kind of use these analogies because young people understand them. But part of it has to do with the fact that, we don't operate our federal government like we do our state and local governments. Federal taxes do not fund federal spending. And if you don't understand that, and you're going up to Washington and you're riding the same train that they've been lying to us about, saying that we can't spend on this. We just spent over $1 trillion in the military and we just cut taxes. Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, because it's not how it works. The federal government is the issuer of currency. They put money into the system so that the states and local governments have resources. They have an infinite supply to put in. It's all political power and political will. And unless you understand that on a federal level, then you're just going to be wasting your time for 2 years. So when I talk about the federal jobs guarantee, we talk about Medicare for all, we talk about free college, we don't need to reinstitute programs from the 1930s. We need 21st century solution, rewrites. And we don't want to open up the Constitution to a convention at a time when we're so partisan. Let us get in there to where the partisanship has dropped, and all we're doing is looking at who the person is, who the candidate is, and what what they stand for, because there are people running in deep red states because they have to, but they're progressives who understand that we need all of these things to bring our society back. We need to stop letting the 1% hoard wealth and not circulate it into the economy, and we need to start investing in programs. This is all I need is a card because I want to talk to each of you personally, and there you go.